we wish that we could do this entire day outside, but we wanted to shoot a little bit of an opening in our own respective urban or rural wildernesses to share with you some of our favorites close to home. And then we're going to take you on a tour of some of our favorite spots a little bit further away. Those of you who know me probably aren't surprised that I actually chose my house based on trees and creeks and areas that I didn't have to mow very often. One of the reasons that I don't mow them very often is so that I can take advantage of all the wildflowers that are here. So I'm just going to show you a few. And here you can see a flower that's still in bloom with a few leaves right here. This is pretty close to the end of toothwort season for me. Back here amongst the various species of honeysuckle, I have my own little patch of May apples, which I'm pretty excited about. The very young pawpaw grove. A little bit of red buckeye. This is my tiny golden seal, just a little bit of woodland medicinal coming up. These are my Czech varieties. So I have the native straight species of Tiara cordifolia and Euchera villosa planted in my flower bed so that I can compare them against all of the newer cultivars. You knew there was some research in there somewhere. This is yellow trillium, or Trillium luteum. And we can tell that it's different from some of the other species of trilliums when we look at the ovary. It is actually light green instead of dark. So there's your geeky plant fact for the day. A little babbling brook, and we're on our way to the last spot. No tour of my back 40 wildflowers would be complete without a shot of some of my favorites. The violets that I pretty much allow to take over my whole backyard. So now, from the backyard to the backwoods, let's take some wildflower tours of Tennessee.
Hi folks, Melody here. I was just going to walk you through a few of the wildflower species I have growing in and around my yard and just tell you a little bit about that. Since I can't really get anywhere on the trail, since they're all closed due to the pandemic, I just thought I'd show you a little bit of what I have growing here. So one of the first species I want to show you is a plant from where I grew up, back home in western North Carolina. It was my grandmother's, one of her favorite plants. It's called money plant. So the unique thing about the money plant is that it is a biennial plant, which means that it's going to produce a lot of foliage the first year, and then it's going to produce leaves the second year. So this is a full-size money plant that we're looking at here, and they can grow to be rather large. Some people don't like these because they can be invasive, but it just kind of depends on your preference. So you'll notice this, the sun's in my way, this little colony here, these are all produced from seed last year, so of course they will be putting forth flowers next year. And again, this is the money plant, or lunaria. So as you can see, I have a pretty prolific stand of this, and I like this to come up here in this little bed every year because, again, the color is so pronounced and it's pretty vivid, and plus I see it outside my kitchen window, which makes it nice. Okay, so another plant I want to show you is false indigo, which is also known as baptisia. And you can just see the beginnings of the false baptisia or false indigo starting to sprout up. It just dies back every year and comes back from these sprouts every year. But this is what the Indians used to pay Americans to grow because of the blue dye, but it was much, much cheaper. So this too also comes from the family farm back home. So another one of my grandmother's favorite flowers was the wood poppy. And you can see here I started with just a couple of plants from back home, and I've really got them going pretty strong in certain areas of my garden, but they make a really spectacular showing in the springtime, especially when they're intermingled with all the money plant. And then also have a few irises that'll come up, and well, they're already up, but they'll bloom a little bit later in the springtime. So here's a unique species that often gets overlooked. I prefer this in my garden because I have a shade garden. So this is called sweet woodruff. It does grow wild, but like I say, it's one of the less showy plants. I've never really seen it bloom, but I kind of keep it clipped since it's on the edges of my garden, of one of these rock gardens. And of course my trees haven't put out leaves yet, so everything's in full sun, but that'll change in the next month. So I too, just like Rachel and Natalie, purchased my house, which was 20 years ago, based on the location and then all of these rocks that you see. I love the big rocks, the rock outcrops everywhere. I have a lot of summer plants that have not yet come up very well yet, but they'll be making their appearance soon. But I too just got a colony of May apples started last year, so I'm hoping to see this really take off. And again, this will be in the shade once the maples put their leaves on. And of course, no backyard would be complete without the wild violets intermingled amongst the rocks. And here is just a sampling of those wild poppies that I was talking about. They push up the gray stalk with a bright red flower, but they bloom a little bit later than those wood poppies. So here's one that is volunteering itself just on the outskirts of my rock garden. Ignore the grass there. I haven't had an opportunity to get in there and get that pulled yet, but this little dainty flower is actually one that's just starting to come on. It's a robin's plantain. So here's some additional robin's plantain. It's coming up in a problem area in the back side of my house. So, but I appreciate this little flower. I think it's really pretty and often gets overlooked. But when it's planted in masses, when you see along like the greenbrier side of the Smokies, it's pretty prolific and pretty showy along the riverbanks. And yet another favorite. This has not quite reached its full potential, but these are what we call snow on the mountain. And this too come from the family farm. And I have a pretty nice little carpet of this in and amongst this rock garden here, along with sedum that I also brought from back home. So you can see the remnants here of my Fiddlehead Fern. It's already starting to do a little bronzing, but you can see what was left of it there. So you'll also notice here all this young foliage that's just starting to sprout up. But this is our native phlox, Phlox paniculata. So it's a pretty widespread species in this area, and it gets really tall, probably 2 to 3 foot. It's really nice, dainty pink bloom. So this is kind of a dead area of my garden right now, but will be quite showy later in the summer, late summer. And of course, many don't consider this a wildflower. It is a member of the Brassica family, just like the money plant, but it's a wild mustard. And I just tend to leave it growing because I like the showy yellow blooms. And coming on toward the end of my intro, of course, Columbines. I'm really trying to grow those populations in my rock garden. So much like Rachel, I've just recently transplanted some. I'm also trying to get my woodland shade garden up and growing, and you can see there the bloodroot. It made a showy appearance just a couple of weeks ago, along with some trilliums. And I also have, of course, lots of money plant coming up there. But I'll also have a lot of native orchids, I hope, which I'm going to speak to you about here momentarily when we get to the portion on the white oak sink. So that's just a little snippet of some of the things I've got going on here in my rock garden in Northeast Tennessee up in Jonesboro.
Hey guys, Rachel Painter here, and I am in Manchester, Tennessee. That is where I live, and this is my house. And we're going to start here in my landscaping, and I'm going to show you my Columbine, which I got at the native plant sale, which is held at Cedars of Lebanon every year. I would really encourage you to check that out. I'm not sure if they'll have a plant sale this year or not, but you can get some great things. So first we're going to look at my Columbine. And I just transplanted this from my house. I just moved, so it's kind of struggling, but I'm sure it'll bounce right back next year. And There she is. And now I'm going to take you on a little walk through my woods. We have a little path back here. And I will be pausing as we go along so that you don't hear me breathing heavy as I go down this trail. But first we're going to start with some squaw root. You can see it here. And this grows on the roots of oak trees. So that means that there was once an oak tree growing here. Now it is growing parasitically on top of those roots. And just a few steps away, we've got some oxalis, and this is currently blooming. Hopefully you can see that. And here's that beautiful flower. And here's some mayaples. There's a ton over there. These are all along the trail. And there's huge groupings of them, as you can see. And here's a double. You can see that that bloom is right there. And only the doubles bloom. We'll get to talk about that a little bit later. Here's another one with the flower still on it. Hello. And I am not very good at identifying the different types of trilliums, but we have tons of trilliums along this trail, as you can see here. There's more of it there. So I just wanted to show you how big some of these can get. Look at that. And show you some more of their flowers. Of course, these are mayaples. And they are so pretty. I love how big they get. And they're very easy for little kids to get excited about if you want to take them out and try to find some. And they get really excited when there's a double and it blooms. So if you can teach them that, that's something very simple that they can ID. And over here, got wild hydrangea right there. Growing all over there. And some purple Phacelia. Let me see that. There she is. Over here we of course have more mayaples, but also I wanted to show you this larkspur. Can you see these dark purple things? And some wild ginger. That looks like a heart. Beautiful. And as we come along the trail here, you can see we are now down by the water. We are no longer up on top of the hill. And we've got some more larkspur. And lots of wild ginger over there. And some bluebells. I have seen down here a hummingbird moth. If you haven't seen one of those, look it up. It looks like a hummingbird. It's actually a moth. And the bottom of it looks like a bumblebee. So look that up, it's really neat. Evidently they love these bluebells. They stick their tiny little mouth part down into that bell-shaped flower. And they are pretty loud actually. So look those up. There's a cool little sinkhole thing. Evidently someone's thrown some trash into. And over here is spotted some hepatica. Alright, so down here we've got some wild geranium, and it is loud because of the river there. And here is that wild geranium. Also got more hepatica. You can see it better here probably. And 3 lobes. There's some ginger. And more trilliums. And tons of wild geranium over here. This one's so pretty right now. Probably in full bloom. These were not quite out last week. And now I'm going to take you to the last spot, which is not exactly about a wildflower, but that's okay. Like Natalie, I did purchase my house based on what was around it, of course. And this is probably my favorite part. No, I do not own this. This is a waterfall here in Manchester. It is closed to the public, but I did get permission from the landowner. This is privately owned. Enjoy this wildflower walk with me and spending time in my backyard. I hope this inspires you to get outside and explore nature in your own backyard, in your own neighborhood during this time, and to plan for next year to get outside and explore some of these wildflower walks that are available to you in our great state of Tennessee.